Welcome to KHTS Radio. My name is Jade Aubuchon. I'm one of the co-news directors here in the KHTS newsroom, and I'm here today with one of our 2022 City Council candidates, David Barlavi. How are you doing today?
And Jade is a Star Trek fan, just like I am. We were just talking all kinds of Star Trek nerdy stuff right now before we got on there. I'm doing great. Thank you so much. I hate the heat. As
It's
you
so
know,
bad.
one of the main things on my platform is that as soon as I get elected, I'm going to outlaw all temperatures above 80 degrees in Santa Clarita. So if you like that idea, I would vote for David Barlavi for city council.
I think that'll work about as well as outlawing crime.
I don't know. I'm going to try. I want to see how it works out.
Well, I wish you luck. Well, let's jump right
Thanks for
into
having me
it.
here. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you so much. Let's start with our first question. Why are you running for city council?
Well, mostly because I'm crazy and I am masochistic and I probably like to torture my wife. Those would be my three top reasons. But I've been a political activist for over 30 years. And people always said, Dave, run for office, run for office. And my response to them was always, I run from office. But somehow I got convinced to run for school board in 2018. And at first, my wife said, no, you can't run. It's too much for me. I can't handle it. And then I thought of a strategy that she actually bought into and she liked, which was why don't we just make the campaign fun instead of making it controversial or cutthroat or going after our opponents? Why don't we just run a fun campaign? And I really enjoyed it, and even better, I won. So I currently sit on a local school board, and that's what I really want to do. I want to make campaigning and politics fun. The other reason is that I think our current city council is very single-minded and homogeneous in their thinking. And I would like to be the voice of an outsider that comes in and says, hey, why don't we look at things a little bit differently and not make those mistakes that we've made in the past? And think of things a little bit more logically, a little more rationally, a little more science based, and try to be more representative of our actual community versus just being very one sided about our decision making process.
Okay, let's talk a little bit of background real quick. You are currently not only on the Saugus Union School District Board, you also work as a tax lawyer. Is that correct?
I do. I am a tax attorney. I do taxes and I do trusts and estates and estate planning and things of that nature. Absolutely. And like I said, in 2018, I got elected to the Saugus Union School Board, a job that I've absolutely loved the last 4 years. COVID was very difficult, but I was proud to serve during COVID and keep our kids and parents and community safe from a horrible pandemic. And I served on the health and safety subcommittee while I was a school board member there, and we had great discussions, many Zoom meetings, and we came up with terrific ideas. The whole subcommittee did on keeping everybody safe and healthy and well educated during COVID. So very happy to say that. Yeah.
It's a very interesting time to be dealing with health, that's for sure.
It was, yeah. When we've never had health and education so interconnected and so going against each other. But we kept it fun, we kept it exciting, and we kept it safe, and it really worked out in the end, I think, for our school district.
There you go. What do you believe as a candidate to be the top three most pressing concerns for the community in the city of Santa Clarita and why?
Well, there's a lot of concerns that I have for Santa Clarita. I think if you were going to ask me to pick some of the top ones, I would say overdevelopment. We really need to put our foot on the brakes for development and start thinking for in the sense of sustainable development, okay, in town, if any, and really focus that on affordable housing and affordable living. Right now, one of the biggest problems in Santa Clarita is our youth is getting drained out of the city. They graduate from high school, they graduate from college, and they either have to live in their parents' garage, as college graduates or high school graduates, or they have to go to Van Nuys or farther south. And we could prevent that. We could prevent that by building some affordable housing for our youth, which will also help our seniors who are paycheck to paycheck have a place to live instead of having to either move out of town or live paycheck to paycheck in very difficult times. Other than that, as a small business owner myself for many, many decades, I'm very concerned about East Santa Clarita's business community. And my concern is more aesthetically. We really need to uplift East Santa Clarita aesthetically. And I have a plan that I've called 10,000 trees in East Santa Clarita. It's not really 10,000 trees, but we really need to make East Santa Clarita's business district up to par with the west side, and not let it keep faltering and faltering and faltering, because we are a unified city and we really need to work together as a team, and not let one side of the city go in a direction that's not good for business and the other side flourish. So I have a plan for East Santa Clarita to plant 10,000 trees and repaint the business district in a way where it's appealing to consumers, where businesses can grow, where people can hire more workers in that sense. And I'm very proud of that. And I would say the last thing is, again, that homogeneity in thinking on the current city council. So not apart from just getting elected myself and bringing some diversity in thinking, I'm very strong proponent of term limits. I want to have no more than 3 terms for city council members, and setting some stronger campaign finance limits, so we don't have some candidates raising $2, $3, $4,000 who are very viable candidates versus the incumbents who are easily raising $60, $70, $80,000 and being crushed, and not having that diversity in thinking. Right now there are more Democrats registered to vote in Santa Clarita than Republicans, but we don't have that representation on our city council. And the reason is that we don't have term limits, we don't have campaign finance limits, and we need to bring that diversity to our board for better representation.
All right. Well, those are all very excellent points. And
Thanks.
Just to clarify, you're talking about East Santa Clarita. You mean the Canyon Country area of Santa Clarita? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, you can see the difference when you go there, and it doesn't need to be that way.
No, it's literally you drive over that bridge on Soledad, and it is a marked difference.
It is, and it doesn't have to be that way. It could be even more beautiful than the Valencia west side area, but we just need somebody who wants to make that happen. And as a business person myself, I know how important that is, and I want to bring that to East Santa Clarita.
Very nice. So this is a question that we're normally going to ask some of our incumbents, but you, as a seated member of a school district, I did want to ask, do you think the votes that you've taken during your service on that board have addressed or contributed to the concerns of the people that you represent?
Absolutely. One of the favorite things that I've done as a school board member is unify our workers, our unions, our 2 unions, with the rest of the district. And that was one of my main goals when I first got elected. And within less than a year of working on that and making sure that's the direction we're going, we have had a great relationship with our unions. Everything has been resolved very nicely and without any threats or anything like that. Great communication, great facilitation of contracts, and I'm very proud of that. The other thing is how we kept the community safe during COVID, and like I said before, serving on the subcommittee for health and safety. That was a big thing for me, and I felt like I wanted to do things a little bit slower than the rest of some other people did. And I felt that voice of wanting to just slow down. Now, I'm not talking about months, but just a few more weeks really helped our district keep things a little bit safer. And I like to bring that science mind to the city as a whole, not just to the school district.
You've mentioned that a couple times. We've already talked about your background a little bit. You are an attorney. You have experience of sitting on a representative council with the school board. What skills or perspectives do you feel you would bring to city council?
Well, I have a degree in physics from UCLA, so I'm very science-minded, and I like to bring a sense of logic and rationality and reason to anything that I try to do. I also coached out here for about 15 years, and I coached hundreds and hundreds of kids, and I've been an athlete and a coach all my life. And I also like to bring a sense of fun to things. So I don't think politics and governance should be boring. I think it should be open to more people. I think it should be more inviting, more welcoming. And I like to bring that to the jobs I have in governance. And I think those two things combined together allow me to bring a perspective to the city council that it definitely does not have right now. And also my experience as a school board member has taught me a lot about how the government works and how the establishment tries to keep the status quo, and new, fresh ideas are kept down in a way where you really need somebody who is strong-willed, who's been an activist like myself for over 30 years, who's able to stand up to that establishment and say, no, that's okay that you've been doing that for the last 50 years, but let's think out of the box. Let's try to do things a little bit differently. And I think it's worked out really well.
Excellent. We already went over a little bit of a couple of the issues in our city, including overdevelopment. Let's talk about the other side of things. In a recent poll conducted by the city, it showed that Santa Clarita residents note that they consider homelessness to be a major issue affecting our valley. Do you think the city is offering enough support to our unhoused residents? And what would your approach as a council member be like?
I don't think we are doing nearly enough. To battle the issue of homelessness in any city or any county or any state or any country, you really have to think about it very holistically. And the first step, and I say this with complete honesty and truthfulness, the first step has to be an attitude and a mindset that considers every person who is on the streets, who is down and out, who is homeless, to be our son, to be our daughter, to be our grandchild, to be our brother or our sister. We don't think of it that way right now. We think of it like we do the least we can to give a helping hand to lift people up. But we really need to change that perspective and give the appropriate humanity to every homeless person. Once we take that attitude, in my opinion, everything else can become easy. But we really have to emanate that through all of Santa Clarita. It can't be that I don't want homeless people around my business. You can't have a NIMBY attitude about where homeless people will be housed or live. These, again, have to be considered our brothers, our sons, our daughters. Once we get there, then we need money. And I have a plan called $1 a year where Santa Clarita will establish a safe website where every resident will go and give at least $1 a year. Now, you can give $5 or $10 a year if you want, but that'll come directly out of your checking or credit card, and it'll go to a fund to eliminate and help homeless people in Santa Clarita. And I think within a few years we'll have several $1 million in that account that we can use for housing and jobs and mental health care and things of that nature. Which brings me to my last point. You could build as many houses and build as much shelters as you want, which we don't do enough of. But if you don't have mental health care and jobs, people are not going to come out of that cycle. So you have to be a huge advocate for mental health care, especially for people who don't have health insurance and can't afford it. We need to be able to plug them into a system and then offer them good jobs that they can maintain their rent and buy their food and hopefully grow and become contributing people to our society, to our city.
Thank you. That was a very detailed answer. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. But like I said again, initially, our attitude has to be very different. We have to be able to look at every homeless person in the eyes, and that's our son. Bottom line. That's our daughter. Bottom line.
Perfect. So you had a little bit of experience of dealing with health issues. You already said you were on a subcommittee dealing with COVID.
Correct.
And the health formatting for that during everything with the Saugus Union School District for the last couple of years. A lot of people are very unhappy with the fact that we were lumped in with the rest of LA County during COVID and the fact that they had a big kind of one-size-fits-all emergency policy about that. What are your thoughts on the city potentially creating their own health department or health administration?
You know, that question always upsets me because it's a very passive-aggressive question, and it avoids the actual question that's being asked, which is, Do we believe in science? Do we believe in medicine? Do we believe when scientists and doctors tell us that masks will save lives, that we should wear them? And do we believe when they come up with vaccines that save lives, that we go out and get them? I stood in those long lines at Magic Mountain parking lot for hours and hours to get my parents vaccinated, my son vaccinated, my daughter, myself, my wife, my parents-in-law, everyone vaccinated. And when we ask a question like that, it implies that those directives or those suggestions that came from LA County that saved Santa Clarita's lives, that saved just across the country millions of Americans' lives, millions of human beings' lives across the world, were somehow wrong. And they weren't. They're absolutely on the mark. We needed to wear masks because it's a respiratory disease, COVID. It comes out of your mouth and it comes out of your nose. So if you could put a mask on, it stops the droplets from coming out and going across the room to other people. Until, of course, we can get vaccinated. And then hopefully we can reduce the need for wearing masks. That's just science. So when we ask, do we need to get away from that? Possibly. What we really need to get away from is LA County treating Santa Clarita like it's trash dump. Okay, not trying to save Santa Clarita's lives with good medicine and good science. But right now, our city council was silent when Chiquita Canyon was going to expand to be the largest trash dump in the whole United States, second largest in the world. They were silent. Well, I stood up to that and tried to change it, but I was just one voice in the community. I want to be a bigger voice for things like that to help our community with environmental issues, jobs issues, women's issues, all those things that are really, really important, not to undermine science and medicine.
Very nice.
Thanks.
I can tell you're really passionate about that. Related to all of the issues that are going on in Santa Clarita, Santa Clarita has been experiencing a lot of issues with fentanyl-related deaths, and not just fentanyl, but other drug-related deaths, which some officials are now calling poisonings because of the technicality that the fentanyl shouldn't be there, really. What can the city do on the city side of things to help address this rash of deaths?
Okay. So drugs have been around forever, and deaths from drugs, unfortunately, have been around forever. And no death from drugs is ever acceptable. Okay? But then the question becomes, what do we do about it? Okay? Now, Santa Clarita is the most conservative area in Los Angeles County. At the same time, Santa Clarita has the worst fentanyl problem.
Fentanyl
problem in LA County. So if you combine those two things, you start to realize maybe being law and order, maybe being war on drugs mentality is not the way to fight addiction or people getting into drugs that's very harmful to them. And that's what that's the perspective I want to bring to City Council. I want to be able to say, okay, we have tried law and order for hundreds of years, and it hasn't changed anything. We have tried this ridiculous war on drugs for decades and decades, and all it's done is made things worse. It's hurt inner city communities, people of color, poor people. That's really who gets targeted. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take all those resources, right, and put it into education? We don't have that. Why don't we take all those resources, that funding, and put it into treatment facilities and rehab facilities? Okay? So when people do start to get addicted, I don't know if you've ever had, God forbid, someone in your family have to check into a rehab facility. It is extremely difficult. Unless you have $30,000-$40,000 in your bank account that you could spare, it's almost impossible. Maybe on a Medi-Cal or Medicare, they'll put you, or Medicaid, they'll give you 30 days, maybe 60 days. But that's not enough to overcome addiction, especially to some things like heroin or other opiates, like you mentioned. So we need a comprehensive plan where if our brother or our sister or our uncle or our friend gets addicted to whatever drug it is, it's not a law enforcement issue. It's not a criminalization issue. We need it to be a medical issue, a healthcare issue, where we plug them into healthcare and they come out a year after that or 6 months after that, however those medical providers need time, so they are free of their addiction without a record so they can get a job, things like that. So that's the perspective I think we need to take on this. As far as particular drugs that are hurting people right now, uh, like fentanyl, education. We need to really hit education hard. But guess what? Our schools are underfunded. So they don't have the funding to take on unfunded mandates. Okay, if we want the schools to educate our kids, we have to give them money to be able to educate our kids on new things. Those are called unfunded mandates, and they can't handle it. So that's why I think we need a change in perspective, both on our city council and in our country as a whole, to move away from this ridiculous war on drugs, to move away from this law and order mentality having to do with drugs, and approach it as a mental health and healthcare perspective and say, if you're addicted, we're going to plug you into a system and you can come out of it healthy and you're done.
So essentially, like education and almost the healing approach first, and then potentially after the fact, as it establishes, then start bringing in the law and order side of things.
I don't think law and order will even be required.
Yeah.
You know, I don't even think it'll be required. Alcohol is currently legal. It kills many, many people. But, we're not raiding liquor stores. We're not raiding people's homes on Labor Day or Thanksgiving and taking away their scotch and whiskey. So it's really not the right approach. But if people become addicted, God forbid, we just need a system set up that's not a criminal justice system, but a healthcare system to plug our family and friends into, and then they come out healthy at the other end. And,
Awesome.
and this is not a novel idea.
No.
There's dozens of countries around the world that do this. We just have fallen to this trap that we approach everything with this law and order mentality. And it works in some instances, but it's failed to help us with drug addiction.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a final question for you. Why should the residents of Santa Clarita vote for you in 3 sentences or less?
Okay. Like I said, voting for someone has to be earned. And I think I've earned it as being a school board member. I showed that I take things with a lot of, I approach things with science and rationality and reason. And I care about kids and I care about the community. So that's the first thing. And I have the experience also through governance. And as being an attorney, I have good experience crunching numbers. As a college graduate from UCLA with a degree in physics, I have a good science mind. But guess what? None of that really means anything in governance. It really doesn't. Because the job in governance has very little to do with all that stuff. Because you could have all those accolades and still not do right by the people. My son's calling. What really does matter in governance is caring, is listening, is understanding, is being able to listen to the community and see what their real needs are, and acting on the behalf of ordinary people versus developers or big corporations. And that's what I can bring to the table. Not really those other things I like to say are not nearly as important as the fact that I really do care about Santa Clarita. I really care about the ordinary people in Santa Clarita. And I'd like to bring a perspective to our city council that is not just about big business, but it's about little mom and pop shops, the brick and mortar shops. We need to protect them. We need to protect our workers. We need to protect our seniors who are paycheck to paycheck, living in very low income housing. Our youth who are just getting out of college. Somebody needs to bring their voice to the table. And I think that's the important thing to do, rather than just be super smart.
Well, thank you very much for
You're
joining
welcome.
us today. This is Mr. David Barlavi, who is one of our city council candidates. You can learn more about him online at, what's your website?
EHD22.com.
Perfect.
If you can see that on your screen. And that stands for Everybody Hates Dave 22.
Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you on one of our next interviews with city council candidates through the rest of September.
Thank you, guys. This was a great interview. I appreciate it.